There we go. Okay. All right. I think we're good. How about you?
Yeah.
All right. So we've done plenty of blogs and other content, and we felt like it was time to change it up and do a video and talk about some recent topics we wanted to share with everybody. Today, we're going to be talking about mainly the application process, what happens after you apply, and Shay is going to be offering some insights from her experience that you can also get in 2 of her recent blogs, which we will talk about later on in the conversation. And yeah, we're excited to get going. If you're watching this, you must know us already. And if you don't, you'll know us on the website. I'm Kelly, founder of Allora Collective. Shay, do you want to say hi?
Hi. Excited to share.
Yeah. So let's get it going. The first question really is to have you walk us through, or have everybody walk through what actually happens after they submit or upload their resume or CV to apply for a job. And we want to split this into 2 perspectives, right? Mm-hmm. First perspective is the behind the scenes of a recruiter's inbox and what it really looks like, so people can understand, did anyone look at my resume, or was I just rejected, and what that volume is like on the other side. And then the second perspective is the new automation in screening and the things they should know about, like you mentioned, for example, like maybe a knockout question or something. So let's start with the first one, the behind the scenes of, you know, what recruiters are seeing and how they're dealing with the high volume inboxes that are frustrating so many candidates.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that this is, for both sides of the hiring market right now, kind of the primary pain point of there's less recruiters in-house dealing with the volume of applications. And as we've seen in the market, more applicants per role than I think historically we are used to. So it's a little crazy right now. And I think in general, you know, depending on the type of role, of course, these ranges are going to vary. If it's, you know, more general mid-level role, like a software engineer with 3 to 5 years of experience, you're looking at, you know, anywhere from a couple hundred to, you know, maybe 1,000 applicants for that role in the first week that it's posted. The volume gets crazy. Maybe if you're in a more specialized field, a more niche skill set, more senior leadership, maybe those numbers are still a little smaller, but in general, you know, we're looking at hundreds of applications per role. And, you know, the main challenge on the recruiting in-house side is, you know, how do I get these numbers down so that I find qualified applicants as quickly as possible? So you'll see a lot of information around how companies are cutting this down from, you know, having a higher hiring bar, maybe more requirements than we're used to seeing to sort of screen people out, screening questions, you know, some of those things will come into play to sort of cut that number down. And then you have sort of incentives to get through those applicants as quickly as possible. So, you know, a lot of companies are requiring a turnaround time of, you know, every applicant is hearing back from our company within 24 to 72 hours. So we're moving through those applications really quickly when they do come in.
I know on the inside, that's the intention. That was always my rule for my teams. That was always my intention. But at some point, it's just the volume makes it almost impossible. Are you seeing, are you also seeing, or do you also find it true that it's possible, or that it's happening, people are getting rejected in batches and no one's even seeing their resume because it's just not manageable?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's only human can do.
Yeah. And then you have, you know, getting into the weeds in terms of how things work on the applicant tracking system side, which for folks that don't know, that's the tool that recruiters, hiring teams are using to sort of manage their end-to-end hiring process. So you can do things like keyword search. So, you know, maybe I have 300 applicants and we're requiring Golang experience, right? So I might search Go or Golang in my applicant pool. Everybody that doesn't have that keyword, maybe I'm, batch rejecting 100 people for that. Not to say that that's exactly what happens, but you kind of get an idea of what's possible in terms of, maybe I'm scraping the profiles for some sort of core requirements, looking through those and, basically finding ways to trim down to, get to the qualified people as quickly as possible. But that does mean that, yeah, sometimes if you are applying to a wide variety of roles or a lot of roles and you're finding that, oh, wow, I'm, rejected within the first hour, 3 hours, 24 hours, that could be a batch reject. That could be something like what we call a knockout question where, they're asking, do you have XYZ experience? Do you have XYZ work authorization? And if you're answering no, sometimes those are auto reject through the screening process itself. So it's being filtered out before a recruiter even gets to that batch of people.
That's perfect. I'm glad you brought that up because my next question was examples of automated screening things. And the first one, which we've talked about a lot and also told clients about, so that.
Oh, no.
Side, in terms of deal breaker knockout questions like that. Like if someone has minimum experience, if they have specific software, if they have work authorization, right? Things like that. And on the ATS side, just in case anybody watching doesn't know, ATS is what we mean by applicant tracking systems would be software that companies use internally to organize and manage all their candidates. So when you go to a company's careers page and then you click apply, and then you end up on a URL that says Greenhouse or Lever or Ashby or Workday, which drives us all crazy because it never parses a resume cleanly, even though the others figured it out. These are the systems that Chez is talking about. So internally, he has the ability to use these essentially databases, right?
Yep.
To search through all the applicants in there with specific terms. So there's a few others in addition to knockout questions that have been introduced. Your blog about tech hiring in 2025 specifically calls these out. I would encourage everybody to read them. It's really helpful to understand what to expect when you're going through the process. But in addition to knockout questions, do you want to mention a few more that might help everybody?
Yeah, so I think knockout questions are pretty common. So years of experience, exposure to certain software, work authorization. I think those are going to be the most common. And then beyond that, we get to kind of the next stage, which I think is a sort of newer market change that we're seeing in the last, honestly, I would say year, which is companies starting to implement automated interviews. So say you get through the knockout questions, you're advanced into a different stage, whether that's manually or automatic. If you're clicking like yes on all of these knockout questions, sometimes those candidates, automatically move to a new stage. And then from there, if you're selected, a lot of companies are doing things like assessments, automated recruiter screens, where you'll get an email and you're going through some process before you talk to an actual human. So sometimes that's something like an aptitude, cognitive test. These can also be, now what we're seeing is what we call AI recruiter screens, where you're actually talking to an AI. It's a recorded video interview. And then after the fact, someone from the hiring team is reviewing that recording. Now there are tools that will score or rank your question. So I think that's really interesting, is like now the AI can kind of predict like, oh, well, this person answered these questions with the right amount of core keywords, content, etc. Mixed accuracy, because I think these models are still relatively new, but something to keep an eye on. And then, recruiter or, hiring lead is getting a notification when you complete that. They go in and review your information. And then after that, you're advanced to the next stage, which could be a recruiter screen. That could be a hiring manager screen. But sometimes it's, those first 1 to 2 stages completely automated just based on the information, the recordings.
And we were talking about this earlier of like one of the dangers with these things, right? I think you and I both come from the school of human contact, of what it takes to hire someone. I still use the analogy of it's kind of like dating, like you have to be friends if you spend all this time with these people. It's very, it's important to do these things. And personally, since the recession of '08, I've seen the hiring process just become more and more productized over and over again. And I personally don't believe that people are products. I don't think it's really that helpful. It might sell a nice tool, but I don't see it improving things for hiring teams or recruiters like yourself. And I also don't see it improving things for candidates, even though it may look good on paper. So hopefully we can help people move through that, like what you're saying about the AI recruiter screens in terms of the automated interviews. Maybe they have time constraints that put pressure on people, so they're not really being themselves or feeling comfortable or natural in those interviews, which doesn't help someone show their best or talk about their best. It's also like a black box. Like, what do you want me to say? People get nervous about that talking to a human, but if you have a human interviewer, you can say, I'm a little nervous. You can ask a follow-up question and say, do you want me to talk about this or do you want me to talk about that? So these AI steps, when they come up, people have to either do it or not. Like, there's really not much we can change about it. And then the automated you talked about, right?
Yeah, and it's knowing how to prepare, what to expect, right? I do think that there are some silver linings, like, if you get nervous and you're on a live call, you can ask the recruiter if you can stop and pause, but it might be a little awkward. On an AI screen, maybe you get through the screen and you realize, I actually want to redo and start over. So there is like some potential flexibility, but I think it's just knowing what is changing in the hiring process so that you can prepare accordingly. Knowing like, hey, you might have to be able to talk about yourself for about 20 minutes to, an automated system. Are you comfortable coming up with the sort of leading prompts on your own about your background to hit those core requirements? Some of those things. So I think, it's an interesting space, and we're still kind of figuring things out as we go in terms of, how to manage on both sides.
And it seems like one of those things that's definitely been helpful for clients is having someone to practice and prep that with. For example, when you're talking to clients and they know there's going to be an AI interview coming up, they don't do it that day, and maybe they pause it and work on it with you first, whether it's a script or a role play, so that they're more prepared for it. And then maybe they also have like a template one, akin about yourself, that they can use over and over, which I think is helpful. There was a piece of it to just let people know really quickly why companies use these tools, because the way we're talking about it, they don't really help candidates. They don't really sound great. Nobody's really happy about it. I don't think every recruiter is happy about it either. But what are a couple of the reasons why companies are trying to use these tools? Like, why do they think it's going?
Yeah. Well, I think, on the greater ATS, I think the applicant tracking system kind of gets demonized, but we do need to be able to track and manage all of these applications in one place. I think that, ATSs aren't inherently bad. And with some of these automations, I do see the value in high volume roles where companies are looking to hire like 200 headcount at once, right? They're ramping up a whole department. I end up using this example all the time because I just feel like it's the most typical, but I think about like customer service, call center, heavy volume sales jobs, right? Where they've got, a ton of need. They're doing onboarding and orientation in large batches where, some of these roles, maybe you have a better shot than you used to because they're sending the automated screen to everyone that applies. And so you actually do get a little bit more of a shot than you would, say if the recruiter is kind of piecemeal picking through. So I think, the use case is very different. I think for the specialized roles, we really advocate for referrals and networking, which I'm sure we'll kind of get to, like the sort of secret workarounds that exist. But I do think for like early career, high volume, some of those, I see why the industry is moving this way, because it does seem like for certain roles, it can be more efficient. But it does, the candidate experience, I feel like that phrase even, it was like such a buzzwordy thing maybe 5-10 years ago. We're not really talking about candidate experience like we used to.
Yeah.
I think that
makes me sad.
It's an employer-driven market right now. So candidate experience, tends to fall down in terms of
It makes me think of the education stuff and how hard we fought against standardized testing. And when you look at other systems, or in other countries, like for example in Finland, where the kids aren't doing standardized testing, they're focusing more on their social skills first and then bringing in that stuff, and they seem to do much better. Okay, so you gave a hint to like a critical insight or a little insider tip that you can give people about these AI tools if they're nervous about it. Because we don't want people, every time they see it, we don't want them to be like, I'm not touching it, I'm ignoring it, even though they can. But what are some of the maybe one or two tips you can give people about these AI things to either get around it?
Yeah, exactly. And I will say too, like, not to invoke fear, because I think a lot of these automations, they're not necessarily going away. I do think that we're still looking at ways to improve on the, employer side. But I think the sort of key silver lining is if you are a sourced candidate, meaning the recruiter reaches out to you, or if you're a referral, I'm seeing that, folks are going through the standardized process still. So you actually
they're skipping the
AI. So if you're applying, maybe you have to go through the automated interview process. If you're, reached out to from someone at the company directly, or you're a referral, you're still speaking with a recruiter, hiring manager. It's still the standardized process. So, I think what's really critical to know in that is leverage your network, because, the referral process is still a little bit more white glove, and, making sure that your profile is discoverable, because if a recruiter is finding you, that is also another way that, you can make sure that you're talking to somebody earlier on in the process.
I love that. So having a referral is kind of a knock-in option, isn't it?
And I like that.
I'm
going to use that again.
Also, since we do have a significant amount of clients that are at a leadership level, which I would consider director and above, or depends on the company, but what have you seen about these AIRPSs in terms of leadership roles?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So the other thing to know is that the automated screens I'm still seeing for lower level. So individual contributor, senior and below. For managers, it's like, director and above are typically exempt from something like this. Depending on the company, maybe it's VP and above. Again, like there are those pockets where, you may not be required to do something automated right away.
Great. I would expect too, if you're at a leadership level, you should have a network you can tap into, whether it's for direct referrals or introductions. That would help you pass through that. And especially at a leadership level, you see more people that are making transitions that have already built a foundation and learned something, and maybe they're transitioning that into a different industry, like financial services to fintech, or consumer goods to some kind of B2C or something like that.
Right.
Okay, very good. So the TLDR of your key message to job seekers about what recruiters are dealing with and what AI is doing to candidates, and how to make the best of it.
Yeah, I'd say the TLDR, referrals and networking are the way to skip a lot of these automated screenings. So really leveraging your network, thinking about who you've worked with in the past, who those strong connections are, who are your advocates, right? Going to those people for referrals first. And also being sourced by a recruiter, which means that, if your profile is discoverable, really maximizing your opportunities, to speak to a live person in those ways. And, the quality referrals still really matter in this market. And I would say, a tale as old as time, but, knowing someone is the differentiator still.
Yeah. Can people get a referral more than once? Are there re-referrals? Sometimes people say, I already asked them and I don't know if I should ask again. I actually had a client ask me about that this week, and my advice was ask again. There are certain limits with certain companies. For example, like with Google, there's the referral link that employees can give out, and there's a limit how many times you can use it, I think in a month or 3 months or something like that. But overall, unless there's an explicit limit, would you advise people to ask again, or would you advise them to back off?
Yeah, and I think the limits are, so some of those are just general application limits for the company. So some companies will say you can only apply to 3 roles within a month or a quarter. So you'll see things like that. And then on the referral side, typically you can refer for like different types of roles. So, say you referred somebody or you were referred 3 months ago and there's a different role open, definitely still go for the referral.
Yeah, it definitely can't hurt. I think it's worth it to ask. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
How about we share a couple of real life examples?
Yeah, I love
Because
this.
we're picking this up. We test everything. We want to see what's going on, and then we go from there.
Yeah. So I've seen this in the past year, I'll say, somebody who was referred. And I think this is a great actually re-referral, because originally this candidate was referred and the job was paused. So they were referred for a role that ended up closing. The referral, and I think this is also on the relationship too, of knowing to check again, right? Their referrer was a big advocate, re-referred her when the role was reopened. The resume actually didn't fit the profile that we were looking for the role. It was a little, it was just a different background than what we were looking for this particular role. But again, the referrer was a big advocate to the hiring manager of why they thought this person was a fit. And she did end up going through the process and ultimately getting an offer. So I always love those of just like not only the long game, but also an example of this referrer really going to bat for like, hey, I actually think you should really talk to this person. And that
I love
it different.
Yeah, I love the advocacy of the transition too, because I think that's one of the tricky parts when people want to make a pivot or a transition, is explaining that, or getting the first person that either reads their resume or they speak to understand between the lines immediately. And sometimes we try with a summary on a resume, sometimes we try in the cover letter or something like that. But the most effective way is to have someone speak on your behalf always, right? And painting that picture for someone. I think as recruiters, we always try to read between the lines. I was very focused on matching the dynamics of the talent on the team and how they work with someone, the art and the science blend of recruitment. But now with such high volume, I think that can be a little bit more difficult to do. I think they lean on the science part, but when you find someone really good and you get that referral and they're like, I'm telling you, this makes them good, and here's how they level other people up. I love that story. I have one. I had a candidate, not a candidate. I had a client who found a job at a large global company, and they were going to apply. And it turns out I knew an executive recruiter at the company. So I said, great, apply, get in the inbox, and then I'll do an introduction to this person, with my usual, anything you can do to help them not get lost in the inbox and get considered. Thanks. And after they applied, like 24 hours later, I got an email. I was rejected. I guess that's done. And I was like, it's not done. That doesn't make sense. You're great. I'm like, I'm doing it anyway. And I sent the message the next day, and the executive recruiter replied same day, which really doesn't happen often.
Right.
He's flooded. Replied same day. I don't know why they got rejected. Happy to chat with them. I have time this week. So they got on a call, and the immediate role wasn't a fit, but they're staying in touch for next quarter because they think more openings will come up. But the moral of the story is, had no idea why this application was rejected. It could have been a bulk reject because there were too many in there and they were cleansing. Who knows? Could have been a knockout question that didn't necessarily make sense.
Yep.
Maybe they put in, 7 total years of experience, and maybe this person had like 10 to 15, or it wasn't exactly like that. And I see a lot of people having these issues. I was talking to someone today about the way they were searching or using an LLM, or, which I think a search system really is. It's only going to give you what you ask for. So if you specifically say this, it doesn't have a nuance wing to it, right? Like if someone says we want 7 years experience, you and I are thinking not about their entire career, or we're qualifying that question of 7 years experience in what?
Right. It's usually 7 years of experience in this skill set, but they might have come from a completely different field before that, or
So I think that's where we can get into little tricky things. Another thing, one other that I had that I thought was good to share, is because I don't want people to be afraid to ask. You really don't have anything to lose. And if anyone is for example, on LinkedIn is where we do most of these messages.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to be messaged, don't be on the platform. We all get spam. I get plenty of it every day telling me they have services that make no sense for the business, for Allora Collective, whatever. But it is what it is. So, but you get nothing if you don't ask, and you have to try.
Mm-hmm.
We had actually, it was a shared client, and she found a job at a company, and I happened to have a connection there. And it was a woman that I haven't seen or worked with in 10 years. And I was like, whatever, let's do it. We wrote a great message, a short note about why she belonged in the role. We went through it. I made the introduction. I said, I hope you've been well. It looks like you've done well in your career. It was really wonderful working for you. Helping someone right now through my network. Is there anything you could do to help them get visibility so they don't get lost? Replied a day or two later. Happy to help. No problem. Hope you're well. So sometimes people won't answer. Sometimes they do. But we focus on the ones that do.
Right.
Because that's the key piece. Any context you want to share? I think this will wrap us up good, but any context you want to share about like internal pushback or because I feel like recruiters take the brunt of these people are rejecting me and it's terrible, but like some recruiters are just really kind of caught in the middle. So do you want to share maybe a little bit of recruiters' frustrations that might help, candidates and clients have a little bit of grace or a little bit more patience with it?
Yeah. And I think right now, we are at an inflection point in the market. I think anyone who is watching or interested in this video or hiring trends right now knows that we're experiencing probably one of the craziest squeezes I've seen in my, decade plus of recruiting, of more applicants than ever. We have more automation than ever, more companies, more tools, promising these sort of turnkey, miraculous AI solutions for hiring. And we are all figuring it out as we go. I don't know that I either personally or within my network know of any company that's got a really clear cut implementation plan for how to use these tools. I think we're all experimenting right now, and I think that we're really looking at the data in terms of like, are these automated screens, are these automations resulting in better, more efficient hiring?
Yeah.
And if they're not, let's iterate. And I think on the candidate side, just knowing that, because of the high volume, like wherever you can make those real in-person connections, great. And I also think that because of other greater industry shifts, I think we're seeing more career pivoters than ever. And I'd also advocate for that as well. If, you're finding that you're searching, 8 months, 12 months, 14 months, and you're not seeing, an effective search, maybe it's time to go back to the drawing board of what are those adjacent careers, adjacent transferable skills to look at, because the market is moving quickly. And we're also seeing that, there's less of specific types of roles. And I also think in the longer term, the market need for specific skill sets is changing, maybe going away in some instances. And so adapting to the market in that way as well. In addition to just knowing that we don't have it all figured out right now.
Yeah, I think most people are doing their best. And I think we forget that everyone has a life outside of their job, and not everyone is having an easy time at their job. And that goes for interviewing as well. When you meet someone in person, it could be that on the other end, they're not having a good day and they're stressed out, and that affects their ability to understand why you're a good fit. I think it's more important than ever to be prepared in a sense that you are practiced almost in a media training sort of way, that you know exactly the key things you need to tell them so that they could repeat it in an interview feedback loop. If someone says, why we hire them, you have to kind of give them those statements so they can repeat it and really understand you and still stay casual and personal. And it's okay if that takes a little bit of practice. Like we learn how to do jobs, but nobody tells us how to interview. Nobody really, communications coaching is a thing, and it takes some practice if you haven't done it in a while. I mean, the average job search for at least a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years already. We're watching people go an average of 4.5 to 6 months. Some land sooner. Usually it's because they, nailed their network. But most people are in that bracket. And a lot of people that are employed can't do a full-time job search. So you have to figure out your own productivity and do things in small bites. And I think the patience required is incredible. But we just want to help everybody. We hope that this is helpful. If you're watching this and there are topics you specifically want to hear us, talk about, or maybe blogs that we've done that you'd like to hear us have a conversation about, we're all ears. Please send us a message. The next one we're going to get into is AI in job search and the LLMs that everyone's using. Whatever your preference, there's plenty of them out there. We have ones that we like, but we have found, especially in the last, I'd say 6 months to a year, we're helping many clients use them more effectively and not waste their time using them. For example, you should not be just putting your resume and a job description into one of these things and saying update it every single time you apply. It is not going to do it. A lot of these offers or things that are happening are quick fixes that seem convenient, but they're not as effective. So in our next one, we're going to talk about ways that you can use it that are effective and will help you. Hopefully that'll be something of interest. Any closing statements? Any closing thoughts?
Yeah.
Snow in the background on both of our backgrounds.
This is so fun. Yeah, I think, to kick off 2026, I think this was really great to talk about, sort of the trends, what we're seeing, but also knowing that, despite all of the craziness of this market in terms of competition, that, there are exceptions to the rule that can be replicated, proven strategies that we've seen. I don't want people to lose hope, because I do think it is still possible to land, great roles within your skill set, within, career pivot changes. They're still happening despite the fact that they're more challenging or maybe taking longer. People are still, deciding to make the switch and job search and level up, and just happy to support and help people feel like there's still a reason for hope.
Me too. I think if we hadn't gone through it personally, we wouldn't want to help other people do it. I mean, that's the whole reason, I did Allora, me, you, and even with Rachel. We have all done this personally and professionally. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to empathize or understand with everybody else. We are 100% about human to human support. We are not productized. There's no courses. We don't do one-offs. Everything is tailored. We have strategies and effective tactics and techniques that work for everybody through their job search, career, or relocations, but we personalize it to everybody because, I don't know, AI really can't do that. And, AI really can't listen to you and hear what you're saying and understand how you're feeling and help you figure out how to convey that to someone in a professional setting, or to manage your nerves when you're going through this process, right? It's difficult. You're going to have weeks where people don't respond. It's not going to feel great, but there's ways around it that can make it better. So hopefully this was a good start to it. Okay. This is fun. I like this. Yeah. We'll do it again next time, right? AI job techniques, the good and the bad, what's hurting and what's not.
Love it.
All right. See you soon.
Thank you.